This is the second part of my review of the BFG by Roald Dahl. Part 2 videos are less direct reviews of books and more a deeper look at some of the themes and ideas in a book that I feel are worth discussing. As a result, this video will contain spoilers, both for the book and for a 1962 short story by Dahl entitled Pig. You can check out my spoiler-free thoughts on the BFG as a whole in Part 1 here. Talking about themes in the BFG is sort of challenging. So much of the book is predicated on a childish view of the world. The novel suggests that the ultimate solution to any sort of problem an English orphan could face would be seeking help from the Queen of England, and the world of the book is one where that idea is in fact the best course of action. Even when the problem is 9 giants that spend each night eating people. Not that alerting the governments of the world is a bad idea for dealing with giants, but to try and argue that the BFG even comes close to tackling real-world politics is missing the point. To an American audience, there's a little bit lost in translation, but the book does a good job of selling the mythical iconography of the Queen, even if you haven't grown up inside that culture. It's presented almost like Sophie thinks of seeking out the president's help, but it's more like looking for help from George Washington. Someone with an awe and reverence attached to them that renders them a symbol of protection and support, but still accessible enough that they would listen to you and be understanding, even if you're a child, like they're the ultimate grandparent. Sophie doesn't want to go to the Prime Minister, she wants to go to the Queen, and the Queen can fix any problem. So in a world where you're protected by Super Grandma, dreams can be blown in ears, and the appropriate punishment for eating people is to be trapped in a pit and fed only gross vegetables, can there even be any deeper themes? Well, surprisingly enough, Dahl revisits a central theme from Pig, a short story he wrote 2 decades prior that is possibly the furthest thing from children's story Dahl ever wrote. While Pig is ultimately a condemnation of overprotecting children from the realities of the world, it delivers that message through a well-constructed discussion of vegetarianism. Pig is about an orphan with a talent for cooking who is raised by his great-aunt. Aunt Glosspan is a conscientious vegetarian who attempts to instill the same moral value in her nephew Lexington, but goes about it by sheltering him from the world rather than presenting an argument for and against eating meat and letting him decide. This protect first, inform later style defines her parenting. After she passes away and Lexington is forced to try and deal with others, her half-truths and coddling ultimately leads to his death, slaughtered and boiled until he's indistinguishable from pork. Pig isn't a pure advocacy for vegetarianism, not really, and it's worth noting that Dahl himself wasn't a vegetarian. The story is at best ambivalent about the issue and mostly uses it as a framing device, but in doing so, it presents a novel approach to the topic by leaving morality out of it. There is a morality argument in the form of Aunt Glosspan's stance, but unlike his aunt, Lexington isn't a conscientious vegetarian. He's a situational one, because there is no meat for him to eat. And through his indifference, the story shows, leaving all the touchy ethics stuff aside, vegetarian food can still be delicious and healthy. A person could live on that sort of diet without much in the way of sacrifice. The food is good and satisfying, so no one is losing out by not eating meat. At the same time, though, Pig doesn't ignore or shy away from the other side of the coin. Meat is also delicious and can be delicious with very little work or expertise, admitting that eating it is still appealing and often simpler to do than trying to eat vegetarian, even if both styles of diet can be satisfying. Without talking about why or why not, it gives a gentle push by asserting that becoming a vegetarian doesn't have to be difficult, but that it's understandable why more people don't go through with it. The ethical ramifications of eating meat comes into the story further along, but when it does, it falls well short of being preachy or judgmental about it. Pig makes an implicit comparison between eating animals and eating humans, but it does so in an interesting way. Rather than going in the obvious and kind of judgmental direction of sliding animal eating down the scale, saying it's as bad as cannibalism, it slides cannibalism in the other direction. Pig suggests that, setting ethics aside for a moment, if eating animals is simple and enjoyable if you don't know where the meat comes from or think too hard about it, the meat you're eating could very well be human. And that doesn't and wouldn't matter any more or less to the average person because they wouldn't know about it. In this, it's harsher towards willful ignorance than the choice to eat meat. If Pig asks anything of a reader, it's to think about what eating meat means to you, and to make a moral decision about it on your own, rather than trying to tell you it's right or wrong. This talk of cannibalism circles back to the BFG and its man-eating giants. The BFG himself is a conscientious, I'd say vegetarian, but he has no qualms eating bacon. Either which way, humans are off the menu for him. The rest of the giants eat people, and the reason for that is clear and simple. People are tasty and it's easy for the giants. The BFG eats huge, foul-tasting vegetables called snozcumbers, something he has to suffer through, but does so because he believes eating humans is wrong. There wouldn't be much of an argument for vegetarianism in the book from Sophie's perspective, which paints the other giants as purely evil forces. The man-eating giants are violent, cruel, and stupid, and uncivilized savages, but let's not go down that sociopolitical rabbit hole right now. And they're very interested in eating her, so she has no reason to think of them sympathetically. However, we also see the BFG's perspective, and while he objects to eating people, he argues against Sophie's human-centric take by comparing the giants eating humans to humans eating animals, and contrasting the giants roughhousing with each other to humans killing each other in wars. The BFG might be making a moralistic stand by not eating people, but there's still a sense of pride and camaraderie there, and to him it's not black and white, people good, giants evil. They're similar yet different. If this is all sounding preachy, it is a little, though the book deftly avoids going full-blown authorial mouthpiece. It stops short of ever pointing a finger at people and saying, "You are wrong," by being content with just asking the question, are you really in a position to be so judgy? The shorter answer is, well, yes we are, but at that point you're getting into a discussion of self-awareness and comparative intelligence, and the book has no interest in getting that nuanced. It is, just like Pig, comparing the moral equivalency of cannibalism and eating meat by sliding cannibalism up along the scale in the direction of acceptability. And also like Pig, the BFG never actually throws itself fully behind vegetarianism. It skips over trying to sell meat-free meals as being delicious, which feels like it's playing to its younger audience. The snozcumbers are a stand-in for any and all vegetables, and the book's counter-argument to a parent's demand you eat your peas is the perfectly child-sensible response of, but they're gross! Additionally, Breakfast with the Queen is heaps and heaps of bacon alongside eggs, toast, and coffee, and neither the characters nor the prose even acknowledges that they're eating meat. It's just treated as a thing that people do. I myself am not a vegetarian, and while I don't have any problems with people who are, nobody likes being condescended to or being on the receiving end of a moral judgment. And it's unfortunate how often pro-vegetarian activism and media tackles the subject from that angle. Whether you think eating meat is acceptable, evil, or you're undecided, being shouted down that it's definitely evil and that you are evil for eating it doesn't get anyone anywhere. So it's refreshing to see a discussion about that sort of issue that just raises questions, especially in literature directed at smaller children. In that way, the BFG has a lot in common with Charlotte's Web. Moving away from the vegetarian conversation, I feel it would be remiss to not address the somewhat unfortunate implications of the Eurocentric worldview. As it's an English novel with a decidedly English target demographic, there's nothing too egregious, but it's worth noting that later editions of the book had minor edits to make the giants less African. Yeah. If you're familiar with Dahl, you might know that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory had similar changes for the Oompa Loompas, with the movie sidestepping the whole thing and making them orange and elf-like. And while making the giants generically white is less racist, it's still playing to a lot of uncultured savage cliches. Some of that's mitigated by the big friendly giant himself, but that gets into the noble savage archetype, which has its own unfortunate implications. As I said, there's nothing too egregious going on, but if you're sensitive to content of that nature, you might be left with a bad taste in your mouth. Just some food for thought, it's at most a minor point. Anyway, other than the cultural interest of Super Grandma and some gentle points about eating meat, the book really doesn't offer that much in the way of challenges for a reader. Which isn't a bad thing by any means, not every book needs to be exceptionally challenging, but looking at it as an adult, it does come up a little slim. It's fun and funny, and that's pretty much all it is. There's more depth to be found in other works of Dahl's. That wraps up my thoughts on the BFG. Join me next month for another 2-part review of a different book. Until then, let me know your thoughts on the BFG or Roald Dahl in general. He's one of my favorites, and I might consider revisiting him in the future. If you have any favorites you'd like to see me cover, let me know. And if not more Dahl, let me know what other books you'd like to see me cover too. I'm always looking for new stuff to read. That's it for this one, TTFN.